Okay, everybody. So I know you guys are all waiting. Sorry for the delay. I know we were supposed to start at 11 o'clock, but there were just some technical difficulties. But today's video or today's interview lecture session is going to be presented by the Queen of Vedic Astrology, Joni Patry. And what this session is about is probably, I would say, it's not Astrology 101, it's Astrology 102. It's less of the next level up, but it's the most important level, where we're going to talk about dispositors, meaning lords of the houses. Like if your planet is placed in the fourth house, let's say Mercury is in the fourth house in the sign of Libra, and Venus is in the sixth house, what kind of results Mercury is going to give based on where the Lord is placed of the house that he's sitting in. Kind of like how a landlord would set up the policies and the rules where you are living. And this is one of the most important concepts and the basic concept of how to make a prediction for a certain planet in a certain time period for a certain transit. And I wanted to do this, on my own, but then I was reading Joni's book. I read all the books, every now and then I've been trying to finish her book, and this is actually her book that she sent me. And I don't know if you can see it clearly. It's called The Eastern Astrology for Western Mind. It's by Joni Patry on Neo-Vedic Astrology. So just in this book, I was reading it, and I'm like, oh my God, she's explaining this so well. So instead of me showing you guys, let's just invite her. And she hasn't been here for a long time, so I'm like, it'll be a good chance to talk to her and discuss all that she's doing right now, and including, seeing some of the charts of people and judging all these dispositors and what she's doing. So please help me welcome Joni Patry.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Kapil. And
absolutely.
May I say something before we start?
Yeah.
I want to really thank you for what you're doing for astrology. I mean this from the bottom of my heart.
Mm-hmm.
When I was studying astrology in the dinosaur age, we had all these crummy books that you could barely understand or read. Right. And now you have brought astrology to the world, Vedic astrology to the world, and your teaching is beautiful. It's so clear, and I think you're the reason why Vedic astrology is going to make a comeback in this world. So I wanted to...
Well, that's what I just wanted to do. I wanted to make astrology cool again. I wanted to make it easy and fun. Not as complicated as you mentioned, where we read the books and we're like, okay, how do I understand this? I wanted to go to the most nitty-gritty, smallest parts and just explain everything from A to Z, as I've learned in like 12 years. So I'm just trying to do the same thing, kind of filling that pothole,
You've done a magnificent job, and
well, thank you so much.
I just want to thank you.
Absolutely, thank you so much.
And with that, I might add the book that you just mentioned, Eastern Astrology for Western Minds. I wrote that 10 years ago, and it just came out on a Kindle. You can get it on Amazon now. So
perfect.
So it's out.
Was there another book I believe you wrote?
Yes, I have. I have a number of books that two brand new books that just came out. Here's my newest one.
Okay.
I'm going to hold this up. It's Astrology, the Divine Order of the Universe. What it's about is numbers and mainly the houses, but how all the numbers all connect and everything's all connected through truly, truly understanding the houses. And this is over 30 years of my experience understanding what all the houses mean through experience, and I believe it's the most in-depth book you can get on the astrological houses and how everything relates.
By number, do you mean like numerology and astrology mixed, or?
I do because it's everything's numbers really.
Yeah.
And it's based on math numbers, and that's what this this book is all about. And then I have another one that I wrote a couple of years ago that just came out in paperback. It's How to Make Money Using Astrology, and it looks at all the grand cycles, and even in your chart about when it's best to invest, or when it's best to somehow go for a job, anything to do with improving your life and being more prosperous. That's what that book's all about.
Okay.
Yeah. So with that, oh, another thing that I've done that I've just, because I've been busy.
Oh, yeah.
I have a brand new online magazine, and it's Astrologic magazine, and what it has articles from so many people. I write every month for it, and you can be part of our community. And you can get a viewpoint of that from our website, which is Get Astrologic Now. But the magazine is Astrologic magazine, and everything about what I'm saying is on my regular website, which is galacticcenter.org. Okay, so with that, let's get on with the lesson here about what I think is one of the most important aspects of understanding astrology, and that's dispositors, because the dispositor to me is the heart and the soul of what a planet is all about. The planet is sort of like the body, but if you want to read deeper as to the soul of what the planet's about, how it's going to operate, you look at the dispositor. And the dispositors are almost like connectors. When you look at the dispositor, you're going to see, like, I look at it as the wiring in a chart, because when you look at maybe, let's say Saturn, you know, right now is in Libra. Well, Venus is the dispositor, by Venus being the ruler of Libra. So the way that Saturn operates is going to be through Venus. And the way that Venus may be placed in an individual's chart in terms of the house and the houses that Venus may rule will really give you a deeper perception of the way Saturn's going to operate throughout life. And when we're looking at transits and the dashas, these particular planets, like if you're in Saturn's Mahadasha and your Saturn's in Libra, Venus is going to tell you the results and how and why the events are occurring in life concerning if you're in Saturn's Mahadasha, or if you have natal Saturn being activated by a transiting planet. Let's just say Jupiter's aspecting your Saturn, and your Saturn's in Libra. Well, the house that Saturn's in is important, but really the rhyme and reason of why the event is happening, what it's all about, is going to tell you through the dispositor, which in the case, if Saturn's in Libra, it's Venus. I also look at the dispositors in terms of making world events. If I'm looking at the transits or the aspects that the planets are making in the sky, I look to see how strong or weak a planet is based on its dispositor. And we all know that Saturn right now has been in Libra for 2 years. So Venus, and where Venus is transiting in the aspects, whether it's debilitated or strong, will give a stronger indication to how Saturn is operating at that time. So, I mean, it's imperative. And also, when we're looking at dispositors, you don't just look to the dispositor. You kind of follow the circuitry around the chart. For example, you go to Venus, and Venus is the dispositor of Saturn. But let's say Venus is in Gemini. Then you'll go to Mercury. So you see there's like these connectors. You go and you follow them around in the chart till sometimes, and most of the time, when a planet is in its own sign of rulership, that is the final dispositor, sometimes of all the planets in a chart, but not always. But let's say, you know, if you have Mars and Aries and planets, you know, you hop around to the dispositor of the planets, and you end up at Mars and Aries because it has no place else to go.
Right.
Because, you know, Aries is ruled by Mars, so therefore it's the final dispositor. Final dispositors are huge in a chart, and I believe that's why it's so important, you know, to look at planets in their own sign. I personally think they're more important. Now, I shouldn't say this, but I do. I think they're more important than a planet that's exalted, because a planet's own sign becomes a final dispositor.
It's like me being in a house or me being in a Vegas in a hotel room. I'll be fine for 3 days, 4 days, but I'll miss home. I feel more comfortable in home.
Oh, yeah.
So then the royal status, I too saw that royal status is okay, but it's really the true strength is from Multragon of a planet. their own sign, their own home, where I feel like I'm comfortable, I'm the king. So I
Yeah.
get that. Yeah.
It's like the cause. It's the soul of the planet, and it really gives that planet strength. But when you follow it around, sometimes you can find a planet in its own sign, and it's
Hmm.
totally disconnected from the chart, where other planets don't disposit to it. Now that planet becomes very strong in that house, but it's not connected to the other planets. And this is important because planets, just like people, we need to feel connected to other people. So somehow it's disjointed from the chart and it doesn't operate well
Right.
because you need planets to be connected. It's almost like when you're looking at Chandra Lagna, the moon chart. The moon needs planets around it to feel support, and that's the way the circuitry works. We need these connections, these connectors. Through the dispositors. It's amazing how this works and how you can get to the root cause of a prediction, why something's happening by following these dispositors around.
Yeah,
Now,
absolutely.
now there's another thing that can happen, and it's called mutual exchange. And in Vedic astrology, we call this a Parivartana Yoga,
Yeah.
which where you'll have two planets in each other's signs, and they go back and forth. And I really never knew what to do with this. Everybody said, oh, in the books it always said, oh, it's great. These two planets are powerful. But powerful for what? What does that mean? What do you
Yeah, yeah,
planets, you know?
yeah,
But what I found, and I've never read this, but this is just through years of experience, that
yeah.
when a planet that's in Parivartana gets triggered by a transit, then it automatically hooks into the other planet and activates the other planet, even though they may not be aspected in the least. So what I'm saying is one of the planets that are intricately connected through Parivartana activates the other one. They're like twins. Does that make sense?
Yeah, so let's say if Saturn's in Taurus and Venus is in Aquarius, if Jupiter goes over Venus, it'll trigger Saturn's reaction too on
You
that.
got it. You
Pretty
got
much.
it. And
Yeah.
Saturn, according to the house that Saturn's in and according to the houses that Saturn rules, that will be
Right.
automatically triggered as well.
Yeah, because it's like a link between the Saturn and Venus like this. So if there's something happens here, the vibration will go onto Saturn as well. So this wiring is something that I understood. And this actually understood from your book too. So that was amazing.
Yeah, I mean, it was just, everybody, they give you all these vague understandings, and I'm like, but how do you use this? Because with astrology, we're helping people through, doing readings and predictions. You got to know how to
Right.
apply all these rules. What does this mean when you're looking at a chart? So,
Yeah.
yeah.
And usually Parivartana Yoga mainly operates and activates in the Mahadasha and Antradasha of the two planets. So if you're running through Venus Mahadasha, Venus-Saturn time period will again activate that linkage and the house rulership that they have.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So we've got to remember that when we're looking at what's important in a chart, because otherwise we just become overwhelmed looking at a chart. You got to
Right.
remember that when you're in a Mahadasha and a Bhukti planet, that those are going to be the most important natal planets to look for in the natal chart, as well as looking at those exact transiting planets. So when you're Saturn's Mahadasha, the transit of Saturn will be far more important than the transit of Jupiter, and vice versa. So these are the things that help in reading a chart, because you really can figure out what to look for instead of becoming overwhelmed by looking at everything in a chart.
Exactly. So what obviously what we wanted to do here is actually show people some of the real clients of yours. Look at how their planetary placements were triggered through dispositors and how things happen in their life. So the first chart that I wanted to bring up here is, I guess you probably, okay, let me see here. So here's the chart. I don't know if you want me to say the name or not of the person.
No, we'll keep them anonymous.
Okay. Okay. So this is a chart of one of your clients who was born as an Aries ascendant. So here is the main chart, and then this is the Namansha chart where you see the 9, and then if you guys are all watching here, the 10 on the screen is the Dasamsa chart, their chart related to career and status in life. So
All right, so let's jump in here. This is one
Okay.
of my long-standing clients. I read for her. I've read for her for years,
Okay.
and she is extraordinarily wealthy. Okay,
Okay.
and if you'll notice by looking at her chart, let's follow around and see where does her wealth come from. Okay,
Okay.
so looking at the chart, she has an Aries logna. That
Mm-hmm.
means Mars is the ruler of the chart, okay?
Right.
Because it rules Aries. Where is Mars placed in this chart? It's in the
Indeed.
eighth house.
Mm-hmm.
And if you'll notice, Mars is in Scorpio. Therefore, Mars is the dispositor of it, it's in its own sign.
Yeah.
So as we follow a lot of the planets around the chart, we're going to see the circuitry here. So the ruler of her chart is in the eighth house in Scorpio, which means Mars is in its own sign, and it is with Rahu. Remember that anytime Rahu is next to planets, it magnifies those planets
Mm-hmm.
like 100 times. Okay, it's a
Yeah.
magnifier. Okay.
Exactly.
So then we see Saturn's involved in this combination. I mean, it looks pretty difficult if you ask me to see Saturn, three malefic planets,
Malefics. Yeah.
right? Saturn, Rahu, Mars. Wow.
Mm-hmm.
But when you really think about what Saturn being in the sign of Scorpio, well, that means Saturn's disposited by Mars.
Yeah.
And Rahu in Scorpio, well, Rahu is disposited by Mars.
Mm-hmm.
And if you will follow around some parts of the chart, you can see Mercury, which is in the 10th house. It's in Capricorn, which is ruled by Saturn. So Saturn is the dispositor of Mercury. And Saturn being in Scorpio, Saturn disposits to Mars. So you see Mars is the stopping point in
Right.
this. And even if you go to the sun is in Aquarius in the 11th house. It's ruled by Saturn once again, which disposits to the 8th house and then to Mars as the final dispositor there. If you'll go to Venus and the moon, which are in the 12th house in Pisces,
Mm-hmm.
what is the dispositor of Venus and the moon? It's
Jupiter. Yeah.
Yeah, so we go to Jupiter, which lands in the 5th house, and it's in Leo, which its dispositor is the sun. We go to the sun, and the sun, being in Aquarius, remember, is ruled by Saturn, and it
Mm-hmm.
goes back to the 8th house where Saturn is, and Saturn disposits to Mars. So this is kind of rare, but Mars is the final dispositor of all the planets in this chart. Okay?
Yeah.
So where do you think her money came from?
Inheritance.
Yes, thank
Yeah.
you.
Yeah.
And everything funnels through the 8th house, in her 8th house, and she is probably, she's a multimillionaire, probably a billionaire at this point in the game. But
Okay.
I just wanted to show you a few things. And another thing I might add.
Mm-hmm.
The money, the inheritance comes from who? Her mother. And actually, it's her mother's father that was one of the richest men in the world at one point. So,
Wow.
if you look at the moon, in terms of the moon being the mother, the
Mm-hmm.
moon goes to the 12th house, but it's with exalted Venus, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
I want you to understand something. There are certain nakshatras that depict very important things. And one of the things that I know is that the nakshatra Uttara Bhadrapada,
Yeah.
Uttara means ladder, but the Bhadrapada generally can mean wealth through inheritance in the second part of life. And where does this wealth come from? Well, the moon is in Uttara Bhadrapada, and it's in the 12th house. It's the mother. But
Yeah.
to look at what I call Bhavat Bhavam, from house to house, which is what
Mm-hmm.
my book on the houses is all about, it's actually her mother's father that had the great, great wealth. So if you go to the 4th house of the mother,
Yeah.
and you move the 9th house is the house for father, correct?
Mm-hmm.
let's count 9 houses from the 4th house, and this is saying the mother's father. So go to the 4th and count 1, 2, 3, 4, 5,
12th
7, 8, 9. Yes, that's where the Venus and the moon are in the nakshatra for major inheritance in the second part of life. So it's the mother's father, and there they land, right there. Not to mention the moon all by itself is the mother. So, but if you follow around the dispositor of where this money comes from, the dispositor of Venus moon being Jupiter, Jupiter in Leo being Sun, Sun in Aquarius being Saturn, lands back into the 8th house with Mars being off the top, incredibly powerful by being in its own sign and magnified by Rahu. I mean, it doesn't get more powerful than this. I thought this example would really blow your mind as to, you know, how you can see that you look at this chart and right away you know that this person has great wealth from inheritance.
And it's also creating a Dhan and Raj Yoga too with Saturn-Mars conjunction in the 8th house. Yeah.
You bet. Absolutely. It's
so
there.
Also, I'm pretty sure some of the audience are wondering, so let's say if you want to predict for Mercury in the 10th house.
Yes.
How would you say this Mercury will react for this person, because the 10th Lord is in the 8th house? How would you go about judging that Mercury?
Well, I mean, the 8th house can be the house of, I find that when people have planets in the 8th house, they're usually good at fixing things, because it's getting to the bottom of things to really understand and to fix things. A lot of people work for corporations where they go in and turn them around when they have the ruler of the 10th and the 8th.
Yeah, revolutionizing things, yeah.
Absolutely. I mean, we've got to get out of this mindset that 8th house is gloom and doom. Because
exactly, yeah. I understand that for sure.
I mean, you look at Einstein's chart, and of course, you know, here's this great scientist with planets all associated with the 8th house because, you know, he's able to get to the bottom of things beyond this world, and come up with discoveries. That's what the 8th house can be about. Yeah. But in this case, she runs businesses herself, and she's opening up all these new businesses and that she's planning on right now. Because she has the wealth and support of her family and her inheritance with Saturn, ruler of the 10th, and the 8th. Her money for her businesses come from her inheritance. That's how I see that. Now, I wanted to talk about a couple of things that have occurred in her life, so I can really show you how you can predict with this. Okay. And one of the things is, it was in the year of April of 2009, she has had 2 of her older brothers die of cancer. Okay, so I mean, look at the 8th house. Remember, the 8th house is the house of death, right? Mm-hmm. So first of all, you got to know your karakas, right? And Mars is the karaka for siblings, right? Yeah. So we Mars, the karaka for siblings, in the 8th house with Rahu and Saturn. There are 2 hardcore malefics conjunct Mars. And Mars, ruler of the 8th, in the 8th, you know, she's lost two of her brothers, 2 of them, and they were both older, by the way. And one thing that I was looking at around that time, let's see, her, it was, as I said, it was April of 2009. So she was in Venus Saturn.
I thought it's Venus Jupiter I see here.
Oh, you're right. You're right. Excuse me. Thank you for that. Yeah, the next thing we're going to look at is the Venus Saturn. I have it underlined. Okay, Venus Jupiter. You are so right. And so when we look at Venus, Venus is in the 12th house. This is what you do. You first just go right to that planet. And Venus being in Pisces, you follow it, it goes to Jupiter. And Jupiter being in, you know, I just follow all the dispositors around till I land at a final dispositor. And that final dispositor, as we watched in the circuitry, ends up in the 8th house. It always falls back on Mars. So you can see how, you know, always things are revolving around this Mars in her chart by the fact this is what happens when you have a final dispositor in the chart. It becomes the most important planet. Mm-hmm. So So everything's going to revolve all the time back to this 8th house, and their money comes or their death comes. These two things are so so much a part of her life.
Yeah.
And, but another thing I might add that is very unusual. At that day, I remember when she called me the day her brother died. She said, "You told me that day, this day would be so difficult and something was going to happen." I wasn't 100% sure of what was going to happen, but I knew something would happen that day. You want to know why?
Why?
This is why I call my book Neo-Vedic, because I use the outer planets.
Right.
And, a lot of the Vedic astrologers do not use the outer planets, but let me tell you something. You're going to miss a piece of the picture if you don't.
Okay.
That day, transiting Neptune was exact, I mean exact to the minute, on her sun. On her sun, the day that her brother died. And if you'll notice, the sun is in the 11th house.
Right.
This brother was older. And the 11th house is the older siblings, whereas the 3rd house is younger.
Yeah.
This is like Neptune. And, you won't read this in the books. Never have I seen where the books say Neptune causes death. But I have seen this so many times in a chart that Neptune can cause death. To be honest with you, I just discovered it. I don't know why, but it's just, I guess because Neptune's actually called the Great Dissolver. So it dissolves things.
Right. Absolutely.
And to be on the sun in the 11th house, that was the aspect that was exactly the most prominent in exact to the minute on that day. So I have to consider Neptune involves tragedies a lot of times. Not always, don't get me wrong. A lot of times it can. You've got to know what you're doing. In her chart, the sun disposits to Saturn in the 8th house.
Right.
With Mars Rahu. That's why this particular sun in the 11th house dealt with death. You see?
Did it had anything to do with her father too, with this transit? Because
no,
sun
because
that represents.
her father has been gone for a long time.
Okay.
Yeah. I mean, look, the sun, disposits into Saturn, which is Mars Rahu. There's not a long father. Okay. So so I didn't know if you'll look also to the Navamsha chart. Let's see here.
It is this 9 that you guys see on the screen. That's the Navamsha chart.
Okay, so we're considering the fact that she is in Venus and Saturn's Mahadasha. So the thing you're going to want to do is you're always going to look at the Mahadasha ruler and the Bhukti ruler in the divisional charts. Not just the Rashi, but look at them in the divisional charts in the activities. Now Saturn is in the 1st house in the Navamsha, and Venus is in the 2nd house in the Navamsha. And if you follow the Dispositors, you'll find that even in these charts that you come up with the rhyme and reason of what's going on. So Saturn being in Mercury sign, Mercury goes to the 6th house, which is the house of obstacles and problems. But the Sun in Venus, it's no surprise that she comes into money with Venus being in its own sign in Libra in the 2nd house. And if you'll just notice in the 11th house of the Navamsha chart, she has Ketu.
Yeah.
This is aside from the Dasha Bhukti, but still, overall, she has Ketu in the 11th house of older siblings. And this represents loss, where something's always missing. She lost 2 of her older brothers to cancer. So you can see this, and if you'll notice the ruler of the 11th house in the Navamsha, by the fact that Cancer's on the 11th house, is the moon, and it goes to the 12th house of losses. So loss of older siblings. So this one isn't as dramatic with the Dasha Bhukti, but you can just see overall the loss of brothers through this chart. But also in the Navamsha, you can see the gain of wealth, too, with Venus being in Libra in the 2nd house with the Sun. You see?
Yeah.
Okay, so another event that I think was really important was she surprisingly came into some money. Now she's destined to inherit, probably, you can't even imagine how much money she's going to inherit one day. But she had an uncle die, and
Right.
somehow, this is just like, oh, by the way, you have $20 million.
That's a good day.
You know? Like, okay, what a problem you must have. So,
Yeah.
so this
Hard times.
this happened in 2012. That it was a surprise that she got $20 million. This was in the year of 2012. Okay, so
Saturn.
back to where I was going before
Yeah.
with the Venus Saturn. That was the Mahadasha and Bhuti she was in.
And Saturn represents uncle. And
Yeah.
Saturn in the 8th house, death of the uncle.
There you go. I love
See?
that. Good
Yeah.
there. You found it. Love
Yeah.
that. Yeah, some of the simplest things work in astrology sometimes, the
Yeah.
card. So looking at when this money surprisingly came, we look at, of course, Saturn, and let's see. Okay, Venus first, Venus being the Mahadasha ruler. And you know what? You should always, always look to the Mahadasha ruler as sort of like the first house and count in relationship to the other houses.
Right.
Okay? So if you look at Venus and you count to where Saturn is, we come to
9th from Venus.
You got it. So when we're looking at that, this is going to be where, actually this money did come essentially from the father, because it's the father's brother, and there you go,
Right.
is the uncle. And, during the whole time she was in Venus and Saturn, she had great wealth because Saturn goes 9 houses from Venus. This is luck and fortune, right?
Yeah.
This is what this is about. And so also, I remember that year, 2012, Jupiter was in Taurus transiting, right?
Mm-hmm.
So during that time, we had Jupiter in her second house, and I believe it was almost exactly conjunct for K2 in the second house at the time this big surprise came. And so if you look at K2, anytime planets aspect the nodes, remember that the nodes are destiny. They're so incredible in terms of prediction. And remember, wherever the transiting nodes are at any point in time are going to tell you where the biggest changes are occurring within your life. Why is that? Because the eclipses are falling where the nodes are. So every year, we have 2 eclipses, 6 months apart, and they will happen in the alternating opposing houses in everyone's chart, depending on where transiting Rahu and Ketu are at the time. So always remember to check out where the nodes are transiting in your client's charts or your own charts, because that will give you the point where there's the most radical and the biggest changes occurring. So during that time, I believe in 2012, we still had, was it Rahu in Gemini, or was it in Taurus? I think it was just leaving Taurus. But we had the nodal axes, because remember they travel backward. Yes, backwards. So I remember it being in Gemini for quite some time. And then, okay, but they were right around Jupiter and Rahu, or Ketu, excuse me, were together quite some time, close to that time, because remember, Ketu has just shifted into Pisces. It was in Aries for the last year and a half. So right before that, she had a nodal return with transiting Ketu with her natal Ketu, and then Jupiter kicked it off. So this was the surprise of money that came in her second house. And don't forget to follow your dispositors. Here we go. Jupiter conjuncts Ketu. Ketu's in Taurus, so the dispositor is Venus, which is exalted in the 12th house. And then follow it around to Jupiter into the 5th house, which is very nice. And then ultimately the Sun, and then back to Saturn and Mars. So this
Mars.
money seems
So
like
no matter what, all of her things will have to somehow do with inheritance and death and revolutionizing things.
you got it. I mean,
Yeah,
it's
that's like the foundation of her life.
that's it. And you see how you can see that from these dispositing planets. It's everything. And always when you got a final dispositor, it's like the keynote of what the life is always going to be about. So
Yeah.
her life is about losses, because the planets do go to the 12th, and the bottom line is inheritances and death. So it's so amazing here. And
Yeah.
furthermore, I might add that I had just read for her, and I noticed that she's going to be going into the Sun's Mahadasha in the year 2018. Boy, is she going to do well during those years, those 6 years, because notice her Sun is in the 11th house of great gains. And its dispositing planet Saturn goes to the 8th house with the Mars at K2, Rahu, excuse me, and this is going to be, she's going to do amazing and bring in more wealth through her businesses that she's planning on starting up, and that will be the time that she will reap the benefits and rewards of all of her businesses that she's starting right now.
Exactly, and Sun being with the Mool Trikon Venus in the 2nd house in the Mansha gives strength to Sun even more. Even though it's debilitated, it's getting the support with Venus, and Venus is holding the lowest degree if you calculate the degrees in the Mansha too, as it shows here.
Yes.
So,
amazing. And when she's in Sun Venus or Sun Moon, they both go to the 2nd house from the Sun. There's going to be great gains in that period.
Yeah, yeah.
So with that, when you couple together the transits, which really trigger off the timing of these dashas, you can see what's going to be happening. But just relatively just looking at her chart, you can see the whole connecting process of how her life's going to unfold based on that, on the dispositors. Isn't that amazing?
Pretty much we call it the grand dispositor.
Yes.
That's what I actually figured out too. So yeah, that's something that people, they just kind of skip, or they don't understand the power of dispositors.
I know.
Especially with the predictions.
It's amazing.
Yeah.
So we can look at some other charts. Would you like to look at another chart?
Yeah. Let me hear. This person is the one whose name starts with D.
Okay. All right.
Let me.
Okay. And looking here, we have Virgo as the ascendant.
Yeah.
And every time I see somebody with a Virgo ascendant or Lagna, you're going to laugh. But during that time that Saturn was in Virgo, ultimately most all of them had relationship problems.
Yeah.
And that was something I failed to mention about the previous chart that I wanted to make note of. Just to say this, the previous chart we were just looking at had Aries as the ascendant, and the transiting Rahu Saturn being in the 7th house for so long, I have to tell you that she went through a divorce during that time.
Wow.
Anyone with Aries on the ascendant has been through a great difficult time according to the relationships with the Saturn-Rahu conjunction that was together for a year and a half and Saturn there for 2 years. But looking back at the Virgo as a Lagna, I know that it was around 2008, 9, 10 that we had all these relationship issues. And if I'm ever trying to rectify a chart and I'm trying to figure out if it's a Virgo ascendant, all I have to say, did you go through a divorce or a breakup in your relationship? Boom, I got it. If they had, I know it's Virgo.
Exactly. That is, that's one of the easiest ways.
Exactly. So let's look at her dispositors. And let's just start out with, I had given a prediction to her saying, you really, really got to watch your brother. There could be some severe problems with the brother. And so looking at her chart, the reason why I was saying that is Saturn was transiting in Virgo at the time, right?
Okay, yeah.
Aspecting Mars. by opposition in the 7th house. And I was thinking in terms of Mars, first of all, as being the Karka for brothers.
Mm-hmm.
Second of all, it rules the 3rd house,
Yeah.
for brothers. And lastly, for Virgo ascendant, Mars is like the worst, right? It rules the 3rd and the 8th. It's a first class malefic. So with Saturn's aspect to Mars, that wasn't looking too good. And at the time of this event, her dasha was Moon Mars. So when you have, and I find the Bhukti really does give the essence of what's happening during that time, more than the Mahadasha. The Mahadasha is the grand scheme of things. And when you look at how the Bhukti is in relationship to the Mahadasha, by counting how many houses the Bhukti is from the Mahadasha ruler, you'll get a feel of what's going on. So during the Moon Mars, if you'll look, the Moon is in the 11th house, and it's in Cancer.
Yeah.
It doesn't go anywhere. Okay? Exactly. You can't go anywhere with Dispositors. And when you go to Mars, Mars is in Pisces, which means it's Dispositors Jupiter.
Yeah.
Jupiter goes to the 6th house with Rahu. This was another key reason why I knew there was going to be problems for the brother. Because not only was Saturn casting a hard aspect to Mars by opposition, but the dispositor of Mars, ruler of the 3rd house, meaning brothers, Karka for brothers, its dispositor is Jupiter, going to the house of obstacles and enemies and problems, right?
Yeah.
And by the fact that it is tightly conjunct Rahu represents there's an issue and there's a problem. Okay. So therefore, I land with this analysis that the brother is going to be the issue and the problem by the fact that Saturn is aspecting Mars and she's in Mars Bhukti. You follow me with all that?
Yeah.
Good. So then if we follow Jupiter around in the chart, we're going to find that Jupiter, Rahu are in Aquarius with disposit to Saturn. Saturn is in Virgo, which disposits to Mercury. And you see you get this circuitry where Mercury is in Pisces. So you see the 7th to the 6th to the 1st. This is the circuitry of how her life evolves in terms of events, how it happens. Obstacles, from relationships. Or, it can even mean, with the son, being the father. That
Absolutely.
There's the problems when that planet was activated. Because why? It's in Pisces, and it's Dispositor's Jupiter, which goes to the 6th house with Rahu. You see?
Yeah. So in this scheme of things, who would you consider the grand dispositor? Would it be Mercury? Like the final
There isn't one. There isn't one. It just keeps
circulating.
There
isn't one. Okay.
When that happens, it means...
So in that case, you don't have a dispositor, the grand dispositor, when it circulates.
Exactly. But each thing is connected, so each event is connected because of other things.
Other things, yeah.
Wherever their dispositors go. Okay. And the moon, all by itself, there doesn't connect to anything. That's where a planet is, like I said, a standalone dispositor. Okay? When we go to Venus, Venus disposits to Mars, Mars goes to Jupiter, and then it goes back into that same circuitry.
Yeah.
But the moon is standalone, so it's isolated. Not to mention, it is isolated anyway. The moon doesn't have planets around it. That means people feel alienated and disconnected to people in the world. And by the dispositorship, this adds to this problem all the more. So
like she has the Kemdrum dosh.
So she feels disconnected from people and doesn't feel supported. That's just it's just it's not a good thing. We need to feel connected to people. We need to feel affiliations and associations. We need to feel love. And I know for a fact that this woman is very isolated, very alone, doesn't have relationships. You'd think looking at the 7th house she does. Well, with Mars there, you'd think, that there's been some difficulty because, Yeah,
it's the functional malefic.
Dosha is, obvious here. Still, you can see that this circuitry led to the fact that her brother committed suicide on around the day that I predicted, based on really looking at the dispositors and Mars. Mars ruling the 3rd house and the 8th house, you know. So
now, did you predict this from transit or from Moon, Mars, Mahadasha, and Antradasha?
all of it, really and true, because you know, you just have to sit down, you analyze it, and go, here's.
Okay, so here's another question. From the Moon, Mars is 9th from the Moon. If you look at the Chandra chart, Lagna chart.
Right. And
how would you have judged that part? Because it's 9th from the Moon, it becomes a Yoga Karka from the Moon, and.
Yeah, I mean, I would not have seen this as readily, but let me tell you what did occur.
Mm-hmm.
Her and her brother were not that close anyway.
Okay. Yeah.
And she happened to acquire a property that her and her brother shared, and she got, you know, sole ownership of it. And she was fighting with her brother the whole time. So all of a sudden, there was a release of all these problems and fighting with her brother.
Mm-hmm.
You know. So,
and actually, if you notice, I just got it. From the Moon, Saturn rules the 8th house, aspects Mars, anyway, still in the 9th house. So again, the luck comes through a very dramatic experience, like better time.
Exactly. And you know, really looking at the circuitry, once again, if you're looking at Chandra Lagna, you know, the Jupiter Rahu go to the 8th house from the Moon.
Right.
So, you know, this is a difficult experience, death and problems, but she did have gains through death after this, because she got the property from her brother.
Yeah.
And you know, when you look at the circuitry making Chandra Lagna, you're going to follow Saturn to Mercury to Jupiter to Saturn, back and forth. So there's always this connection of 8th house, 9th house, and 3rd house, which, remember this, it was her brother that died. The Saturn goes 3rd from the Moon.
Right.
You'll always see it, no matter how you twist and turn these charts. And I think, when you look at the, is it the Navamsha chart? I can't see the writing.
Yeah, the Navamsha chart.
And the Navamsha chart, just notice that Mars goes to the 8th house. Mars is brothers.
Yeah.
Okay. I even pulled up the Drekana chart, which is about siblings, and you can see it clearly in here because the Sun goes to the 3rd house, and it's with Pluto, and it's aspected by Saturn. So you see there's just this difficulty, and even Mars in the Drekana chart goes to Cancer, where it's debilitated. So you'll see it in all of the charts that are relative to what you're looking at.
I always also said that in the mantra chart, many astrologers will say don't look at the house placement or don't look at the aspects, just the house, the planetary placement, but that's actually not accurate. You have to look at the mantra chart just like the birth chart. Like
you absolutely do. I was taught that way. Kapil, I was taught exactly that way. I was told never look at the aspects, never look at the house rulers. And I was like, well, what do you do with these divisional charts? I felt like I had my hands tied.
Exactly. Absolutely. And so once you do that, once you break that method and actually go towards the way you do, then it just makes sense. And it made sense to me in 2007. I'm like, there's no way aspects conjunction have nothing to do with the birth chart. It does.
It does.
Yeah.
It does. So that's a big secret we just let out, because ever since I untied those handcuffs about using the divisional charts, everything started coming alive. So absolutely, you use those divisional charts the same way that you use the birth chart, and it works.
Exactly.
It's just, remember, those divisional charts are only about specific things, like Drekana brothers, Saptamsha children. You don't use it for anything else. Sometimes we get carried away.
Exactly.
So we've got another chart. Do we have time for this one?
Actually, we might be running out of time now.
Okay.
Yeah, because then what happens is if I go over 50, 60 minutes, the screen will slow down even more.
Okay.
So that's why I always keep it to 30 to 45 minutes due to the durations.
Okay.
And actually, I see the fact that now your screen is becoming more broken up and pixelated. So
Oh, I see. I see. I get you.
yeah.
Okay. So
But you know what? This was such a great lesson. These two charts gave so much meat of the whole lesson. So it's amazing that dispositors is you gotta look at all the time. Without that, you can't predict anything. You just can't. It's like, just you can't.
Right. So, yeah, so I hope that everybody understands how powerful and how important that a dispositor is the soul of the planet. It's, really what tells you the reason why something's happening and gives you all the information that you will need in terms of understanding the circuitry and everything about a person and their life.
Absolutely. So thank you so much, Joni, for coming here today. And I again want to thank you. And also I just wanted to tell people that you actually have a YouTube channel too, right?
Oh yeah, I have.
That they can subscribe to.
Yes, it's Get Astrologic Now YouTube channel, and in it I like to give world predictions. I have a lot of world predictions and what's going to be happening in terms of where all the transits and planets are transiting in the sky monthly. So whereas you have all these wonderful classes, I'm telling the world what's happening in terms of prediction.
There you go. So yeah, so please subscribe to our channel, as you heard, and their websites and everything. The link will be on the bottom of the video. So thank you so much for coming today.
Thank you, Kapil.
Absolutely. Bye-bye.